Well, some of the value is created from what the asset actually is, but it's ultimately about volatility.
Hmm.
And the volatility can essentially be harnessed to drive value to shareholders.
This episode is brought to you by Trezor. Trezor makes beautifully crafted hardware wallets that make it easy for you to safely store your cryptocurrencies. I'm a big believer in self-custody. I've been using hardware wallets for years, and Trezor was the pioneer of hardware wallets, and they started this journey in 2013. Their hardware wallets are open source, and they support a variety of tokens, from Bitcoin to the top altcoins and even new coins such as BlackRock's BUIDL. And I'm personally a user of the Trezor Safe 5. It's a beautiful device and easy to use. And Trezor offers a hand-holding service where they can help you onboard and set up your device so you can speak directly to a Trezor representative who can hold your hand through the process. And if you use the code Thinking Crypto, all one word, you can get 5% off your purchase of a Trezor device. So to learn more about Trezor and all their great devices and services, visit the link in the description. Hey folks, welcome into the Thinking Crypto podcast. I'm your host, Tony Edward, and joining me is Joseph Onorati, who's the CEO of the DeFi Development Corporation. Joseph, great to have you.
Hey, Tony. Thanks for having me. It's awesome to be here. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. As we were talking about before the recording, I'm excited to speak with you because DeFi Development Corporation is using Solana as a treasury reserve asset, and we're seeing this trend of many companies doing this. So lots of questions around that. But let's kick it off with your background. Tell us about yourself, where you're from, and what's your professional background.
Yeah, sure. Most recently, I was at Kraken. I've been at Kraken for about 8.5 years in a bunch of roles. I left about a year ago, most recently there as the chief strategy officer. Um, when I was in that spot for about 2 years. Prior to Kraken, I guess I got started in the crypto space when I went to work at CA Vertex, the first Bitcoin exchange in Canada, back in 2013, and they made me the CEO of that company, and I sold it to Coinsetter. Then Coinsetter got acquired by Kraken later. A little earlier on, I studied economics. I almost did a PhD in economics with a bit of a focus on monetary theory, which probably got me into crypto later. And I've worked in public policy sort of think tank kind of thing prior to getting into the space. I grew up in Virginia in the States, but I live in Canada now.
And what was your first encounter with Bitcoin, and where did that happen, and what was your aha moment?
Um, Bit of a story here, I think. So, uh, when I was a teenager, I played this game called Ultima Online. It was like a precursor to World of Warcraft. It was a massively multiplayer game, and I used to sell stuff in the game. And this was in like 1999, probably. Um, and I remember the prices were going up in the game every day, and I would go to sell my stuff, and the prices would be up and up and up. And there was like a exploit basically to print the currency in the game, to duplicate the currency in the game, inflate it. And I remember one day the prices were going up, 50, 100% a day kind of thing. And then the next day, half the people who were quoting had just switched currencies, and it had happened spontaneously. Like overnight, half the economy switched currencies they were using, especially for large transactions. And I had, geez, like how is that a thing? Just everybody coordinated or is spontaneous? And then I started quoting in this other asset as well. And I didn't understand it. I went to university later, kind of fell into economics, and sort of learned how this sort of stuff happens. And I ended up studying monetary theory and writing on early digital economies in these games. And then in I think it was 2011, one of my friends from my graduate program sent me an article on Bitcoin. I think it was the first Wired article on Bitcoin. And I said, geez, this is just like that stuff that used to happen in the games. We could just switch currencies. And I kind of got it, immediately. But I wasn't like a technologist, and I hadn't worked in kind of startups or that space at all before. So I just sort of followed it from an academic perspective. I didn't understand that I could participate and facilitate adoption. So then in 2013, I kind of stumbled into a Bitcoin meetup, and there were two people there. Um, One guy who was running the meetup, and another guy who wanted to buy drugs on the internet. And and so that guy left, and I talked about monetary theory for 2 hours with this other guy, and he said, you can actually work in this space. Like, there's businesses here. Like, you can actually make money doing the stuff that you're excited about. I said, what, really? And then I just sort of went down the rabbit hole, learned about all the businesses at the time, uh, and went to work at Steve Vertex.
That's an incredible journey, and you're an OG. I mean, you worked at Kraken for so long. I'm sure you've seen many phases of this crypto asset class in its infancy and now maturing. What are your thoughts on how things have changed so significantly for the crypto?
Yeah, kind of the biggest one for me, that kind of got me, I guess, was uh, I know Bitcoin wasn't kind of private from the kind of founding, but I think the community earlier on had a major ethos around privacy, and it was kind of one of the core tenets, one of the, we'd say, crypto values, at Kraken over the years. And I think that we've basically abandoned that. And I'd say for me, kind of personally, that was the biggest change. And I guess we sort of traded um, privacy for adoption, um, for better or worse.
Do you think that privacy coins like Monero and others will survive, or maybe not because the direction the governments are moving in, they want everything KYC, AML compliant?
Yeah, I think Monero will definitely survive. I think Monero is like, the current protest currency, and I'm pretty pretty bullish, I would say, on Monero as long as we're confident the uh, kind of ring signature approach is able to maintain privacy.
Mm. Now, you left Kraken and then you went to DeFi Development Corporation. Why'd you make that move? And was it to maybe steer this company towards crypto?
Well, I had a bit of a gap in between, so I worked on some other projects. I did some advising. I worked on a decentralized options platform, and I helped build a market making platform. So just kind of had fun, I'd say, in the space. The reason I left Kraken was to start a company. When I joined Kraken, I knew I wanted to be a founder, and I sort of, I don't know, stuck around for a long time because, it was growing and I was learning a lot, I would say. And then for the kind of pivot to DFDV, DeFi Development Corp, um, uh, it became clear, I suppose, that choke point two was ending and the public markets were going to open up to crypto. And I was kicking this around in, I don't know, probably December. And then I got in touch with Parker White, who's a COO and CIO at DeFi Development Corp, and we worked together at Kraken since 2018. And we just started talking about what might be possible in kind of a post choke point two world in the public markets. And Parker was running a couple of validators, and we'd both been active in Solana DeFi since mid 21, and just kind of got excited about the opportunity.
So tell us about DeFi Development Corporation. What is the company about? What do you guys do? And how did it become a NASDAQ listed company?
High level, the business is a Solana Treasury strategy company. So we basically raise money, buy Solana, Sol, hold it on the balance sheet. We run validators as well. We delegate the Sol to our validators. We also have third-party delegation, which generates additional revenue. And we have adopted Sanctum's DFDV sol, which is a liquid stake token um, that we participate with and facilitate or uh, end up with integrations or partnerships across Solana DeFi. Um, yeah, I'd say that's the core business. So as I suspect you've noticed, there are many treasury strategy, crypto treasury strategy companies kind of coming to market, and the way they are coming to market in the US anyway is essentially they find a currently listed NASDAQ company and they do some sort of transaction with them. And the reason this is happening is because it's the fastest way to go public in the US. It's much faster than going through an IPO process or a direct listing. So we found a target in a company that was previously named Janover, and we simply bought over half the stock of that company in a single transaction from a single shareholder, um, which gave us control of the company. And then we have raised a couple of rounds of financing into that business, renamed it DeFi Development Corp, and have started our SOL accumulation strategy.
Now, we've seen a lot of companies started with Bitcoin, right? Michael Saylor essentially put out the blueprint for this. And we see with MicroStrategy, then they rebranded to Strategy, has gone all out and they're buying tons of Bitcoin. And that has expanded to altcoins like Solana, ETH. I think some companies mention XRP as well. Why Solana? Is it because, your expertise is in that, you have the pedigree with Solana? And are you planning to expand to other crypto assets?
We don't expand, or we don't plan to expand to any other crypto assets for the foreseeable future. And we picked Solana for three reasons. So one is, well, I guess overall we think it's the best suited asset for a treasury strategy company. And those reasons are, one is it has native yield. So we can run validators inside the treasury strategy business, stake the balance sheet to the validator, and earn revenue. Um, Two is it's more volatile than Bitcoin, and kind of the key ingredient to the success of the treasury strategy companies is volatility. Ultimately, the volatility gets monetized for the benefit of the shareholders via convertible debt financing, uh, which we've seen Sailor run this play for years now. And third is there's actually stuff you can do with Solana in its like one chain, right, in DeFi, which I made reference to earlier. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't other assets that are well suited for treasury strategy companies either, though. I think there's going to be many of these, right? Like we just saw the Tron one launch recently, and I've talked to many founders or management teams who are looking to do a change of control or pivot a listed company into a altcoin treasury strategy. I tweeted, I think that I'd expect the basically any asset that anybody can argue is not a security in, say, the top 100, by market cap, will probably have a treasury strategy company associated with it in the next 6 months.
Interesting. And you mentioned the yield, and with Solana, of course, you can stake Sol. Um, is there any type of dividends that is paid out to the shareholders via that staking rewards?
No, I mean, it's possible for a public company to do dividends, and they could do dividends based on the staking rewards. But the way we're operating our company, and I think is the way that all treasury strategy companies ought to operate, is to never do dividends on the common stock and to use all of the accumulation of the treasury asset to drive the key metric, which should be crypto asset per share, in our case, SOL per share.
Hmm. And how much capital have you raised so far to buy Sol to build out this treasury strategy? And are you planning to do further capital raises?
We've raised a little over 70 million total now, and we have just under 100 million worth of Sol on the balance sheet, about 620,000 Sol now. Um, do we plan to do more capital raising? Of course, I can't talk about any kind of specific plan or, you know, notion of it, I suppose. But of course, the primary um, method of driving Sol per share growth is this notion of accretive dilution. Basically, if the company's stock is trading at a premium to the net asset value, the balance sheet assets, then uh, additional share issuance, selling them into the market, or uh, financing of basically any type that's done at over 1x NAV is accretive on a Sol per share basis. So since that's our key metric, I hope we're able to pull off meaningful fundraising in the future.
So Joseph, there's going to be a lot of people asking this question because this is still brand new to a lot of people, right? This concept and this strategy. Um, why, if you're putting Bitcoin or Solana, or why not can't you use gold or real estate on your balance sheet? Why does that impact the stock price and create this value?
Yeah, I actually don't think that, well, some of the value is created from what the asset actually is, but it's ultimately about volatility.
Hmm.
And the volatility can essentially be harnessed to drive value to shareholders, as I mentioned before. And I think this is kind of the key driver to premium to NAV that kind of facilitates the whole Treasury strategy flywheel. And for companies that haven't done convertible debt financing, then it's the uh, market likely assuming or forecasting that they will be able to do that. And I described this recently in a Twitter Spaces we did, I think just yesterday. But uh, convertible debt financing is this is the way MicroStrategies raised money for many years, or one of the ways MicroStrategies raised money for many years, and it was the way we did our first fundraise led by Pantera. But essentially, one uh, can find investors who will buy a convertible debt instrument that's priced at a premium to the stock price. So, for example, BitDeer just did one that was announced this morning. I think that was at a 25% premium to the common stock price, and those investors then can hold the convertible debt instrument for 5 years. They have the right to exercise the debt to convert to stock. So, presumably, as the stock appreciates in value, the investors convert, gets into the money essentially, and they may exercise to convert to common stock, and the debt, the bond, is removed from the company's balance sheet because it's converted to stock and stays as cash. Um, and in order to get the investor to kind of agree to that deal where they're uh, paying over market for the stock, they pay a coupon of interest rate. Sometimes it's zero. MicroStrategy's kind of famously raised these zero coupon convertible bonds. Um, but the other benefit is the downside protection. So in a default or bankruptcy, a bad situation, the convertible debt holders are ranked above the common shareholders in the capital stack. So, if something goes bad, they get paid out first. And relative to, what we've seen with like crypto bankruptcies with exchanges and so on, that payout process is pretty quick. It's clean. So, if you were to think about kind of a risk to reward sort of chart, maybe uh, the upside is limited to some degree with the convertible debt instrument, but the downside is, I mean, there's a lot of downside protection that facilitates these investors to get in. And then there's these funds that basically buy the convert and short the stock and uh, benefit or trade on. that volatility. So MicroStrategy is one of the most volatile, I think it's the most volatile stock uh, of its size, and it's able to essentially harness this volatility via significant convert premium. We see their premium on the convert to the stock price of 35%, for example. And that's sort of the key piece that I think starts the premium flywheel. So you go on Twitter, and the haters are saying,
Mhm.
"Oh, a lot of these companies traded a premium. I'm not buying that. I can just buy Bitcoin." Um, well, just buying Bitcoin doesn't monetize the volatility and turn your investment into a Bitcoin uh, kind of growth engine or Solana growth engine.
So absolutely get that, and the benefits and opportunities there, if you know what you're doing, of course, right, to be able to operate in the market. But let's say, and this is a question I genuinely have, I would ask Michael Searle this if I got to interview him again. Let's say the price of Bitcoin, the price of Solana, everything goes up this year, right? Bull market, all that jazz, new all-time highs. But then a bear market rolls around, and we've seen historically big drops in the crypto market, 60 to 80% drop. So let's go conservative and say the price drops by 50% or 55% next bear market. How does that impact what you're doing? Does it put you at any risk?
I love that 50 to 55% is conservative. Right one. Um, so real answer, it can. But I think a temporary drop is not a problem. It's a long-term sustained winter that's the risk. So uh, essentially, if these companies are able to continue to raise money and pay off their convertible debt, then it's not a problem. And the dates or the duration on most of these are very long. So, for example, our convertible debt that Pantera led was 5 years. MicroStrategies are 5 years. The one that I talked about from this morning, I think, is 5.5. So, for the most part, these companies are kind of planning around uh, like a 4 year crypto cycle, which we've historically seen. Will it hold up? I don't know. The other kind of thing to watch out for is secured versus unsecured debt. Most of the convertible debt instruments out there for the larger companies are unsecured, but the secured ones can be structured like a margin loan, where you can get liquidated. If price drops 50%, investor calls and says, "Okay, time to pay up," right? And I think certainly there will be some treasury strategy companies who are in a position where they will explore that sort of transaction, and I think those are risky, and investors should pay a lot of attention to the filings for how exactly these businesses are raising money. But I think if done right, it's basically about planning. I've been through a lot of bear markets, right?
Mm.
Been working at exchanges since 13, and have been kind of front and center for the extreme volatility uh, and you know sort of bad situations that the bear markets can put these companies into. And I think ultimately it's just about planning. I I hear this from or I used to hear this from the Wall Street guys who come over into crypto and they say, geez, we need some more gray hair in this room. Like none of y'all have been through, say, the '08 crisis or whatever. And, uh, I think just having lived through this stuff, kind of changes uh, how one thinks about, planning for a bear market. So hopefully that, protects us.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, because we've seen the cyclical pattern to your point, the 4 year cycles and all that. So, just curious, would you have to liquidate some of your soul holdings at that point, or not really? You just, if you plan accordingly, you just hold and keep adding until the reversal to another bull run.
Yeah. So the intention would be to not sell, but uh, I don't know. Can we totally rule it out? Like, I don't know. I could imagine our company or other companies in these, really bad situations where they're sort of forced sellers, but I'd say we'll do everything we can to avoid putting ourselves in that situation. Um, and I think longer term, there'll probably be some kind of investor kind of protection mechanism that's sort of table stakes for the treasury strategy companies, where like, we compete ourselves into this position where if the company trades below 1x NAV, there's some kind of like dividend of the underlying asset or uh, the ability for an investor to redeem in some way. I think that's very likely. Um, I haven't seen anybody implement it yet, but I'm very excited to kind of see where the industry trends on that for like a best practice.
Yeah, for sure. Now, we're seeing companies around the globe doing this. Just an example, like Metaplan in Japan, obviously they got Bitcoin. There's others who are doing different assets as well. Um, do you see this trend continuing? And will there be a point where it's not going to be a play that's profitable anymore, or due to, let's say, the asset class maturing, more liquidity coming in, and there's less volatility?
Yeah, yeah, I think there'll be more kind of treasury strategy businesses around the world. I think there's sort of these geographic or jurisdictional structural reasons for uh, treasury strategy to be successful in one geography or the other. And Japan kind of is famous for this tax situation on crypto, but there's other countries that have other um, tax considerations that could drive adoption to treasury strategies. And then kind of, do I see this slow down later and how? Yes, I think ultimately, as long as there's more volatility in the crypto assets and even more volatility in the treasury strategy company stocks than is in the underlying asset, uh, then I think kind of the party continues. And uh, to the extent, yes, of course, I think that ultimately, like long term, Bitcoin volatility goes down significantly as it becomes the global store of value. And in that case, I think uh, other assets are better suited for treasury strategies. I mean, ultimately, maybe um, the volatility on all of these assets decreases over time, but I think we're many years away from that uh, outside of Bitcoin.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think this you may have answered a question here, but I want to make sure for the listeners and those this, who are now encountering this, the reason folks have not done this with gold or real estate or other assets is because the volatility is not there, but crypto gives them that volatility, or crypto assets give them that volatility. And also, I don't know if the hard cap or the finite supply in some of these assets also contributes to that.
Yeah, I considered whether the finite supply matters. I actually don't think it does. I think it's primarily the volatility. And I've heard some teams contemplating gold as a treasury strategy vehicle. And I think it's interesting, but I don't think it's volatile enough to drive a meaningful convert premium. So I don't know, maybe it trades more like an ETF than a treasury strategy would. But there will likely be non-crypto, ultra volatile assets that are suited for a treasury strategy company. And, I'm excited to see those emerge, but I don't know off the top of my head what asset it would be.
Yeah, for sure. Now, recently, Cantor Fitzgerald, they initiated coverage of Solana treasury companies. And of course, DeFi Development Corporation was part of that list. What are your thoughts on that and what they're looking to do there?
While I think Cantor's a kind of leading bank, investment bank in the space for working with Treasury strategy companies. So I guess I'm not surprised that they initiated coverage on the Solana ones, and I would not be surprised if they initiated coverage on uh, other assets as well, other Treasury strategy assets as well.
Do you think there's going to be ETFs launched with treasury companies as part of them, whether it be Bitcoin, Solana, and the group, or specific ETFs? Here's the ETF for only Solana treasury companies.
Um, I have not talked to any issuer who is contemplating that, but I think as the market grows or matures, that's likely. Yep.
Hmm. Yeah, it's so fascinating. I'm very curious to see how this trend continues and how this space unfolds. Um, Obviously, you mentioned your goal is to set up this Solana treasury, continue to grow it. But what's on your roadmap? Are you planning to do anything else with Solana, or expand to other assets or things like that?
Yeah, we would like to engage more deeply with Solana. And of course, we've announced many integrations for DFDV Sol, and I look forward to further DFDV Sol integrations, um, and continuing to focus on growing Sol per share.
Hmm. Um, Now, I want to switch a bit to the crypto market at large because there's so many things happening. Just yesterday in the United States, stablecoin legislation was passed in the Senate. Obviously, you're in Canada, but you're familiar with the US market. You are living here. What are your thoughts on that? And also, what are you seeing in Canada? Anything optimistic there as well?
Candidly, I don't pay much attention to the Canadian crypto regulation. I paid a bit more of attention to it when I was at Kraken, but I think kind of US matters most, and I pay much more attention there. Um, I'd say the stablecoin bill was a long time coming. I don't know, probably a bit of a shame that it's not more open, more inclusive of a broader range of stablecoins, but uh, I guess it's progress nonetheless.
Yeah, for sure. After the past 4 years of getting attacked, I think things are starting to open up, and it's more favorable for entrepreneurs and innovators, so which is really great. But maybe to your point, they have to fine tune these legislation items. They'll get something through, but maybe amendments and so forth can be added at a later date.
Mhm.
There's also like the market structure, which I think is the bigger one, which security, not security, what can you do, not do, as it, relates to the SEC and the CFTC. That should be impactful as well.
Yep, agree. Yeah, I think that one will be a bigger impact, if or when it gets done.
What are your thoughts on the move towards tokenization? It seems all of Wall Street, not only are they involved in ETFs, but they want to tokenize traditional assets like stocks on the blockchain. What are your thoughts on that market and real world assets being tokenized?
Yeah, I think this is sort of a no-brainer, and the technology's been there for a long time, and essentially how these assets are regulated has probably prevented um, mass adoption of them on chain. And um, I think it's just a matter of time. And I think that kind of time window is shortening. This stuff is coming, and companies are going to find a way. And I think there's going to be, uh, say, a deluge of value transferred on chain from so-called real-world assets. I'd say securities, I think, are kind of an interesting one. It's a little difficult to say they're real-world assets, I think, because I think it won't be long before we think of these assets as crypto native or crypto first.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. And I'm fascinated or interested to see how what you would call maybe truly global markets, because you're certain people around the world can't access like certain stocks, but if you put it on the blockchain and it's tokenized and fractionalized, you can access it 24/7 because this is a 24/7 market, no holidays, no opening and closing bell. I'm curious how that all functions and how it's going to change markets.
Yeah, this is kind of a minor point, but I was thinking about how one would do 24/7 markets on perpetual swaps. Like, how are we going to trade on, hyperliquid or drift or whatever, um, with no 24-hour index price? And I said, geez, these things are going to have to get liquid on the AM indexes first for an index to exist that runs 24/7 to facilitate uh, decentralized tokenized stock trading on perpetual swaps, which I think is going to be awesome. Very excited for this future.
Yeah. Well, your old firm, Kraken, they're launching tokenized stocks and rumors are, well, I don't know if it's a rumor now, but they are looking to do an IPO. It seems like it's crypto IPO season as well.
It's definitely crypto IPO season. Yes, it's interesting. Yeah, so Gemini's coming. Of course, Kraken, I think, has talked about a timeline publicly. But the treasury strategies are kind of, the next 50 of these, whether it's an IPO or a change of control of some sort, a reverse takeover or something else. I think that's going to be the kind of major series of headlines over the next 6 months or so, more so than the major crypto companies that have kind of finally been able to come into the public markets.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm curious, and I should have asked you this earlier, but when you're if one is looking to do this reverse takeover, so to speak, to have a corporate strategy, whether it's with Bitcoin or Solana or other assets, are you looking at any specific sector? Do you kind of look at something maybe in tech, so there's some sort of common ground there, or it doesn't matter?
I talked to a lot of kind of founder teams or whatever trying to do this now. And my advice is it doesn't matter. It's more about uh the vehicle itself. Like, um, does it have debt? Uh, can you work with the current management team? Um, is the current business losing money and how much? Kind of how much hair does the business have is kind of an easy way of putting it, I guess.
There's been lots of talks about over the years of zombie companies in the stock market, right? Is this a way to bring a life to many of these zombie companies? And once again, it's nuanced. You got to go through the details because that term may be used too loosely. That they're not really zombie companies. They are profitable. They're just not doing anything spectacular or anything that draws you in. But as long as they're profitable and they're going, but this could help bring new life to them.
Yeah, I suppose so. But if the current shareholder base or board or management team doesn't support the pivot to, or, pivot to the treasury strategy, then, I don't know, the deal's not going to happen. So, uh, if the company is profitable and the team or board are happy with the performance or prospects of the company, then, no deal. And I'd say to uh breathe new life into the notion of a zombie company. I don't know, it's a little hard for me to imagine it that way, I would say.
Sure. Yeah. And the reason I just mentioned that because recently Saylor was interviewed by Jordan Peterson, I think it was. And he mentioned something about that. For years he tried to break through and penetrate, but he couldn't break through against the bigger competitors like Microsoft. And this was a way to do that. But adding Bitcoin and it obviously drew the social attention and people talking about the company once again. So while his company wasn't unprofitable and it wasn't like losing money, it just couldn't. It was David versus Goliath in a way, but he found Bitcoin and that helped skyrocket to the company to the mainstream.
Yeah, okay, I could see that. So there's sort of a variety of the type of transactions that are going on. So if it's current management, like in the case with Sailor, and they say, okay, we're going to put Bitcoin on the balance sheet, or we're going to kind of pivot the company's core focus to this, I'd say that's one kind of way to do it. The other way to do it is for a third party management team, and investors to come in and say, okay, we need to find a target and do a transaction so we can run our treasury strategy play. And the latter seems to be much more common than the former kind of currently. And I think this is largely because the the management of these companies that are potential targets are not kind of crypto experts and might not be familiar with kind of what's possible. And kind of likewise with the crypto experts or presumably crypto experts, sometimes they're not crypto experts, but anyway, the people who want to come in and find a vehicle to, do a transaction quickly are just sort of different different skill sets typically. We got lucky with ours, I would say, where Blake Janover, the founder of Janover, the company that we did the transaction with, he stuck around. He stayed with us, and he's running the core business. He's on our board. He's an incredibly creative guy. Um, and we've also been able to maintain or retain the CFO, Bruce, who's been a CFO of public companies for 20 years. And he's been awesome. We also kept our audit chair, who's been an audit chair or CFO for public companies for 20 years. And the team that we brought in, I mean, all of us are, or almost all of us are ex-Kraken, kind of crypto natives. I think the sort of two groups together have been an awesome combo.
It's amazing. Pretty awesome. I'm looking forward to obviously your success and see what else you decide to do with Solana. I'm a Sol token holder, so I'm bullish on that front. But I got some wrap-up questions here for you, Joseph. First, if you could create your own metaverse, what would the theme be?
Probably like a medieval fantasy kind of thing, ultimate online world style, I would say.
Nice. Rapid fire questions. Favorite food?
Chipotle.
Favorite musician or band?
I don't think I have a favorite. Maybe Jelly Roll.
Favorite movie?
Probably Empire Strikes Back.
Favorite book?
Shantaram.
And when you're not working, what are you doing for fun?
I work a lot. Yeah, play some computer games and exercise.
Awesome, Joseph. Great chatting with you. Love the Solana Treasury strategy, and looking forward to the future updates. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, Tony. Appreciate it. Had a good time.